Bonne année. Welcome to 2015. This is our first session this year. We're midway through the 10th chapter of the Life Divine, Conscious Force. There are other copies here if anyone needs. Yeah. So, Sri Aurobindo has posited that there is a sheer absolute existence of which the universe is a manifestation. That the first thing that presents itself to us when we regard the universe is the phenomena, the play, the movement, the dynamic dance of everything that is moving in the cosmos. He traces this to a force, a primary nature. And he says if we look at its first presentation, this force presents to us matter. And if we look at the underpinnings of matter, the old Indian metaphysicians said that there are basically 5 elements, which are akin to the elements that we know from Greek and Latin cosmology as well. There's akasha, space, ether; vayu, air; tejas, fire; up, water; prithvi, earth. And these each are apprehendable to us through Shabda, which is vibration; sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. So these are the ways that our senses gather these forces of elemental construction of matter. And everything in our worlds is constructed of the interplay of these 5 elements. These are metaphysical notions and not chemical notions. Let us make that distinction. This is found in the old Sankhyan philosophy, the philosophy of enumeration, but it does not answer to us, even if this is an apt description of force in play, creative of the physical cosmos, why consciousness would appear. So that riddle as to how consciousness arises is core to this chapter for Sri Aurobindo. So if we admit that this movement of force is the first presentation of nature, how do we account for the rest? If force is inherent in existence, because we see it, it must already be there, it inheres as a facet, as an aspect of sheer existence, then why would it come out and dance? Now, if there is no consciousness in it, if consciousness is merely something thrown out somehow by material nature, then the why doesn't arise. But if there is consciousness, so now we open and continue where we were last week with the next paragraph.
Randy, you could turn your speakers down all the way.
But if we suppose or find existence to be conscious being, the problem arises. If existence is more than simply material force, then we have to stop and look at this question. He writes, we may indeed suppose a conscious being which is subject to its nature of force, compelled by it, and without option as to whether it shall manifest in the universe or remain unmanifest. Such is the cosmic god of the Tantrics and the Mayavadins, who is subject to Shakti or Maya, Purusha involved in Maya or controlled by Shakti. But it is obvious that such a God is not the supreme infinite existence with which we have started. Look at that for a moment. If this cosmic God is compelled by force to create, not through self-selection, but through outside force, that is not the nature of the supreme existence that we have been talking about. Because if there is one who is existent, whose nature is consciousness, then anything arising from that infinity and from that boundless energy must also be directed by that being. It cannot arise independent of him. It cannot overpower him, as we'll see in the coming sentences. That is not what we have in mind. This is not an answer to the yogic experience available to us. So, he continues, admittedly, it is only a formulation of Brahman in the cosmos by the Brahman, which is itself logically anterior to Shakti or Maya and takes her back into its transcendental being when she ceases from her works. In a conscious existence, which is absolute, independent of its formations, not determined by its works, we must suppose an inherent freedom to manifest or not to manifest the potentiality of movement. So, if there is this Godhead, then whether it holds all of its energy within or distributes it in an endless manifestation is its choice. It cannot be compelled by force because force is it. A Brahman compelled by Prakriti, by nature, is not Brahman, but an inert infinite with an active content in it more powerful than the continent, a conscious holder of force of whom his force is master. So Godhead is getting bullied by that which should be serving his will? No. If we say that it is compelled by itself as force, he writes, by its own nature, we do not get rid of the contradiction, the evasion of our first postulate. We have got back to an existence which is really nothing but force. Force at rest or in movement, absolute force perhaps, but not absolute being. Again, this is not his position. It would entail that nature could force an unwilling Godhead to manifest. To continue, it is then necessary to examine into the relation between force and consciousness. And now we're getting to the nub of it. But what do we mean by the latter term? Ordinarily, we mean by it our first obvious idea of a mental waking consciousness, such as is possessed by the human being during the major part of his bodily existence, when he is not asleep, stunned, or otherwise deprived of his physical and superficial methods of sensation. That is how consciousness would be portrayed in a standard manual of psychology. In this sense, it is plain enough that consciousness is the exception and not the rule in the order of the material universe. If you look at the vastness of the cosmos, this gigantic sphere of multiform manifestation, there is a thin strip which you can call mind. If this waking mentality is what consciousness is, it is a minor movement in the cosmos. Again, this is not Sri Aurobindo's position. We ourselves do not always possess it, that is consciousness. But this vulgar and shallow idea of the nature of consciousness, though it still colors our ordinary thought and associations, must now definitely disappear out of philosophical thinking. For we know that there is something in us which is conscious when we sleep, when we are stunned or drugged or in a swoon, in all apparently unconscious states of our physical being. Recall the citation at the beginning of the chapter from the Katha Upanishad, awake in those who sleep. This is a wakeful, conscious being through all the terms and manifestations of the becoming. Not only so, he writes, but we may now be sure that the old thinkers were right when they declared that even in our waking state, what we call then our consciousness is only a small selection from our entire conscious being. And this recalls the opening citations and also the Mandukya Upanishad, which describes the four states, ending in the Turiya, the fourth, which is the all-swallowing infinite. It is, Sri Aurobindo writes, a superficies. Let's pause for a moment. Superficies, that means a face, the outside surface of a thing, something that is without depth. So, it is a superficies. It is not even the whole of our mentality. Behind it, much vaster than it, there is a subliminal or subconscient mind, which is the greater part of ourselves and contains heights and profundities which no man has yet measured or fathomed. So he's talking about the conscious belt of mind, that there is a subliminal and a subconscient mind. We need to look at those terms because they will play long and well through the entirety of the book. The subliminal means under the threshold, behind the line. But for Sri Aurobindo, we'll see that it means behind, almost directionally, behind the surface of our mental awareness and the rest of our awareness too. Subconscient, you see, that's a French term. It was coined by Pierre Janet. His dates, 1859 to 1947, in reference to an awareness that is powerful, but beneath the rational mind, which can enforce its own objects, its own desires upon the waking mind, unknown to that mind. Subconscient is the French term. It is rendered as subconscious into English. Sri Aurobindo throughout prefers the term subconscient, so you'll see that. And he'll draw another distinction in about a page, so we'll wait patiently till we get to that. But let's understand that behind the waking mind that we associate with consciousness is this far vaster thing, deep, powerful, below and behind, ranges of awareness of which the conscious mind has no clue. This knowledge gives us a starting point for the true science of force, he writes, and its workings. It delivers us definitely from circumscription by the material and from the illusion of the obvious. So we are free, in a sense, from thinking that consciousness is pinned by materiality. And this unites by implication, consciousness and force. That's what his sentence is suggesting, that consciousness is an aspect of force. If we accept that force is the primary presentation of this pure existent, still consciousness must be there. It suggests that there is a great power in unseen regions of awareness. But back to materialism for a moment. Materialism indeed insists that whatever the extension of consciousness, it is a material phenomenon inseparable from our physical organs and not their utilizer, but their result. This orthodox contention, however, is no longer able to hold the field against the tide of increasing knowledge. Its explanations are becoming more and more inadequate and strained. It is becoming always clearer that not only does the capacity of our total consciousness far exceed that of our organs, the senses, the nerves, the brain, but that even for our ordinary thought and consciousness, these organs are only their habitual instruments and not their generators. So, Sri Aurobindo is asserting that there is a reality which is conscious and which uses the body and the brain as media through which it experiences and expresses itself. Consciousness uses the brain, Sri Aurobindo writes, which its upward strivings have produced. Brain has not produced, nor does it use the consciousness. So the verb uses implies that consciousness has power, and that brain is secondary. So get rid of the brain, consciousness continues to exist. Perhaps it does not have the modality that it had before, but surely it should continue to exist. This is an argument that is still going on. This argument has not disappeared. This argument that Sri Aurobindo is asserting here is championed today by David Chalmers, Australian psychologist and philosopher. So the debate is not over. To continue, there are even abnormal instances which go to prove that our organs are not entirely indispensable instruments, that the heartbeats are not absolutely essential to life any more than is breathing, nor the organized brain cells to thought. Our physical organism no more causes or explains thought and consciousness than the construction of an engine causes or explains the motive power of steam or electricity.
Wow.
The force is anterior, not the physical instrument. So look at this hierarchy of being. The last extrapolation is the physical instrument. Anterior to that, in front of it, is the force. By implication, consciousness is behind the force. So consciousness into force, into manifestation in the world, into materiality. This again is an implication. He isn't stating it directly. Momentous logical consequences follow. In the first place, we may ask whether, since even mental consciousness exists where we see inanimation and inertia, it is not possible that even in material objects a universal subconscious mind is present, although unable to act or communicate itself to its surfaces for want of organs. Consciousness is immanent in matter. Consciousness is not limited to individuals. Consciousness is universal. Whether mind be subconscious, it might be universal. If mind is conscient, although it's available through individuals, perhaps that also is universal. These things are implied, not stated. That's not the purpose of his argument here. But as we go along, we'll pick up what shells upon the shore we can find. Is the material state an emptiness of consciousness, or is it not rather only a sleep of consciousness, even though from the point of view of evolution, an original and not an intermediate sleep? Original because matter is the launching point of evolution, from down up. Huh? So from sleep to waking, from the subconscient to the conscient. And this again is an echo of what we encountered in the Katha Upanishad. Awake in those who sleep, this universal consciousness. And to continue with Sri Aurobindo, and by sleep, the human example teaches us that we mean not a suspension of consciousness, but its gathering inward, away from conscious physical response to the impacts of external things. Well, we're still alive, we still exist when we sleep, and we wake up. And is not this what all existence is that has not yet developed means of outward communication with the external physical world? Is there not a conscious soul, a Purusha, who wakes forever even in all that sleeps? So he's establishing that consciousness is present throughout this range of being. We may go farther. When we speak of subconscious mind, we should mean by the phrase a thing not different from the outer mentality, but only acting below the surface, unknown to the waking man, but in the same sense, if perhaps with a deeper plunge and a larger scope. So this truly is that which lies below our ground of awareness. We're up here swimming through our day. This is a sea of existence of which we are little aware. When it throws up its impulsions upon us, we become aware that this came from somewhere. Why? Where? What is that? That's below. Now, but the phenomena of the subliminal self far exceed the limits of any such definition. So he's referring now to that which lies behind that line of consciousness. Exceeds the limits. So it's a vastness. So he is drawing a distinction here between the subconscious and the subliminal. Keep that in your pocket. We'll be using that a lot. It includes an action, he writes, not only immensely superior in capacity, but quite different in kind from what we know as mentality in our waking self. Double star. We have therefore a right to suppose that there is a superconscient in us as well as a subconscient, a range of conscious faculties, and therefore an organization of consciousness which rise high above that psychological stratum to which we give the name of mentality. So, a subconscient, a conscient, and a superconscient. Sub means below. The consciousness that we have is what we would call the conscient world, our normal waking reality. And then super means above. So it is above that line of consciousness. And if you can see then, we've got a staircase of consciousness available to the evolving spirit. We move from our past, which is subconscient, to our present, which is conscious, towards a superconscient future. We will grow as we go. I think, if you'll permit, I think I'll read that sentence again. We have therefore a right to suppose that there is a superconscient in us as well as a subconscient, a range of conscious faculties, and therefore an organization of consciousness which rise high above that psychological stratum to which we give the name of mentality. And since the subliminal self in us thus rises in superconscience above mentality, may it not also sink in subconscience below mentality? Are there not in us and in the world forms of consciousness which are submental, to which we can give the name of vital and physical consciousness? If so, we must suppose in the plant and the metal also a force to which we can give the name of consciousness, although it is not the human or animal mentality for which we have hitherto preserved the monopoly of that description. So, Sri Aurobindo has just declared that consciousness permeates all of existence. That in the animal and in the plant, consciousness consists of a reality relating back to that supreme existence. If only that existence exists, if it is the one, then even the various planes of experience available to us are all part of its manifold oneness. Remember what Sri Aurobindo wrote in the last chapter, that infinite multiplied endlessly to the view, that infinite existence multiplied endlessly to the view. All of it, part of that oneness. This has consequences. Not only is this probable, but if we will consider things dispassionately, it is certain. In ourselves, there is such a vital consciousness which acts in the cells of the body and the automatic vital functions, so that we go through purposeful movements and obey attractions and repulsions to which our mind is a stranger. We know instinctively what to do. In animals, this vital consciousness is an even more important factor. In plants, it is intuitively evident. The seekings and shrinkings of the plant, its pleasure and pain, its sleep and its wakefulness, and all that strange life whose truth an Indian scientist has brought to light by rigidly scientific methods, are all movements of consciousness, but as far as we can see, not of mentality. So Sri Aurobindo accords consciousness and therefore sentience to all beings, to animal forms of life, but also to vegetal states of life. This differs from the Buddha, who said that sentience ends with animality. Plants are not sentient, so you can eat them. You're not harming anything. The Vedantic view is much more Catholic than that. Life eats life. The big eats the little. I won't rest there. I want to mention that J.C. Bose is the great Indian scientist to whom Sri Aurobindo refers here, 1858 to 1937. He was a physicist, he was a biologist, he worked in radio in the early days. He invented wireless technology and distributed it freely. He wanted people to be able to use it without cost. Such was the magnificence of his heart. And he developed sensitive instruments which measured the impact of stimuli upon plants and then later upon metals, and demonstrated that plants could, in a sense, respond thrilled to the right vibrations that we impose upon them, or shrink in horror from them. And metal could be demonstrated to get tired, to express fatigue, and to begin to fail and to wear out. And he could measure it scientifically. And he was greatly lionized, not only in India, but across the Western world as well. One of the first great Indian scientists. I think we finished that paragraph, no?
Well,
Does the range of what we can call consciousness cease with the plant, with that in which we recognize the existence of a sub-animal life? If so, we must then suppose that there is a force of life and consciousness originally alien to matter, which has yet entered into and occupied matter, perhaps from another world. Footnote. The curious speculation is now current that life entered Earth not from another world, but from another planet. To the thinker, that would explain nothing. The essential question is how life comes into matter at all, and not how it enters into the matter of a particular planet. Well, this is still alive, and theories that life originated on Mars, got knocked off by a comet or an asteroid, and traveled through lots of empty space and arrived here on Earth. The question still is, how does life manifest in matter? For whence, he writes, otherwise can it have come? The ancient thinkers believed in the existence of such other worlds which perhaps sustain life and consciousness in ours, or even call it out by their pressure, but do not create it by their entry. Nothing can evolve out of matter which is not therein already contained. That's a sentence you want to underline. This is a fundamental point, crucial to the unity of existence. He continues, but there is no reason to suppose that the gamut of life and consciousness fails and stops short in that which seems to us purely material. The development of recent research and thought seems to point to a sort of obscure beginning of life, and perhaps a sort of inert or suppressed consciousness in the metal and in the earth and in other, quote, inanimate forms, or at least the first stuff of what becomes consciousness in us may be there. Only while in the plant we can dimly recognize and conceive the thing that I have called vital consciousness. The consciousness of matter, of the inert form, is difficult indeed for us to understand or imagine, and what we find it difficult to understand or imagine, we consider it our right to deny. Think of your body. You're aware of your thoughts. You're aware of your emotions. You're aware of your physical sensations. All of them pass through sensoria to be interpreted by the mind. Are you directly aware of the body? Are you directly aware of the earth? Only through this arrangement of senses and mental equipment which interpret that experience. Can we become conscious of the body? Yes, there are means by which we can become directly aware, and the genius of India entered into that region as well, roughly 1,000 years ago, and developed the science of Hatha Yoga, which answers that question. How can we bring consciousness out of the body? How can we vivify it? How can we lengthen the life? How can we bring light into the mind? And can we take this instrument heavenward? But this question of whether matter contains consciousness is crucial to Sri Aurobindo. We'll continue and see. Only while in the plant, we can dimly recognize and conceive the thing that I have called vital consciousness, the consciousness of matter, of the inert form, to repeat myself, is difficult indeed for us to understand or imagine, and what we find it difficult to understand or imagine, we consider it our right to deny. Blame my poor eyesight. Nevertheless, when one has pursued consciousness so far into the depths, it becomes incredible that there should be this sudden gulf in nature. Remember, he has described to us that beyond the realm of consciousness is a superconscience, a greater range of awareness. Below is a subconscious. And here we're just describing the ranges of mentality. Then he's added a vital realm, and now he insists that why should the field of consciousness find its terminus there, only in living forms? Why should it not be found all the way to the bottom of the world in matter, in unum, food itself? Thought has a right to suppose a unity, where that unity is confessed by all other classes of phenomena, and in one class only, not denied, but merely more concealed than in others. So this is the second right that he has claimed in this chapter, that we can conclude by means of reason. Remember, he is trying to present the terms of his mystic experience, his power of intuitive penetration into the penetralia of all, with a rational exposition that satisfies our minds. And if we suppose the unity to be unbroken, we then arrive at the existence of consciousness in all forms of the force which is at work in the world. So one force of one existence, and it is conscious. Even if there be no conscient or superconscient Purusha inhabiting all forms, yet is there in those forms a conscious force of being, of which even their outer parts overtly or inertly partake. So, two things you can derive from that here, that he's distinguishing the personal from impersonal awareness. Plus, he's also speaking about conscious force vis-a-vis mere awareness. In other words, could there be an awareness which is merely blank? That is the Purusha, simply watching things but not involved in them. Prakriti plays, Purusha watches. Or is this the demonstration of a conscious force? We shall see directly. Necessarily, in such a view, the word consciousness changes its meaning. It is no longer synonymous with mentality, but indicates a self-aware force of existence of which mentality is a middle term. Below mentality, it sinks into vital and material movements which are for us subconscient. Above, it rises into the supramental, which is for us the superconscient. So it is a self-aware force of existence. Consciousness is a self-aware force of existence. It has power innate in it. Going back to the title of this chapter, conscious force, Chit Shakti. It is a tantric term which indicates that there is no division between spirit and nature. Nature necessarily must be an expression of spirit. What is spirit? Conscious being. Conscious being is conscious force. Conscious being can express a universe or hold it within itself. Or do both at once. suggesting that the superconscient for us is the supramental, points directionally to what we must evolve into. We must leave the sphere of mentality, this half-light, and arrive at full luminosity in that which is above the mind, that which is above consciousness as we know it. So there is this unbroken realm of consciousness, matter, life, and the various grades of mentality leading to the superconscient. And he continues, but in all, it is one and the same thing organizing itself differently. This is once more the Indian conception of Chit, which as energy creates the worlds. Essentially, we arrive at that unity which materialistic science perceives from the other end when it asserts that mind cannot be another force than matter, but must be merely development and outcome of material energy. They're arguing the same thing. They're arguing for the unity of existence. So we have to give credit to materialism for that. Science, which pursues that, insists that anything that is experienceable to us must be part of that material world. Yes, matter, matrix, mater, mother, is simply that to the Indian conception, this mother is not merely material, but she is all this. Essentially, pardon me, I read that. Indian thought at its deepest affirms, on the other hand, that mind and matter are rather different grades of the same energy, different organizations of one conscious force of existence. There is no division. Differentiation, yes, but no division. And he continues, but what right have we to assume consciousness as the just description of this force? For consciousness implies some kind of intelligence, purposefulness, self-knowledge, even though they may not take the forms habitual to our mentality. Even from this point of view, everything supports rather than contradicts the idea of a universal conscious force. We see, for instance, in the animal, operations of a perfect purposefulness and an exact, indeed a scientifically minute knowledge, which are quite beyond the capacities of the animal mentality, and which man himself can only acquire by long culture and education, and even then uses with a much less sure rapidity. We are entitled to see in this general fact the proof of a conscious force at work in the animal and the insect, which is more intelligent, more purposeful, more aware of its intention, its ends, its means, its conditions, than the highest mentality yet manifested in any individual form on earth. And in the operations of inanimate nature, we find the same pervading characteristic of a supreme hidden intelligence, hidden in the modes of its own workings. And that goes back to the citation at the start of this chapter from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. So, animals do not have to think it out. They do not have to rationally derive what they need to do. They don't have to choose among a number of options which would be the best. They know and they go. So, matter and nature generally follows a line of development which allows precise operations. animals can achieve their ends without the dubiety of the mind, without the doubts, simply by going for it. The only argument, Sri Aurobindo writes, against a conscious and intelligent source for this purposeful work, this work of intelligence, of selection, adaptation, and seeking, is that large element in nature's operations to which we give the name of waste. In other words, detractors of this type of mystical philosophy, if I may, call attention to the fact that nature wastes a lot of time. Oh, if she is indeed going in that direction, then why doesn't she get there faster? Why doesn't she develop better tools? Sri Aurobindo answers, but obviously this is an objection based on the limitations of our human intellect, which seeks to impose its own particular rationality, good enough for limited human ends, on the general operations of the world force. Keep this sentence in your pocket. It's going to appear in the next couple of chapters. The same sense of the human's limited ability to gauge the vastness of what's at play in the cosmos. He writes, we see only part of nature's purpose, and all that does not subserve that part we call waste. Yet even our own human action is full of an apparent waste, so appearing from the individual point of view, which yet we may be sure subserves well enough the large and universal purpose of things, because indeed the universe is acting through us, we just don't know it. The cosmic purpose is fulfilling itself in our every action. That part of her intention, which we can detect, nature gets done surely enough in spite of, perhaps really by virtue of her apparent waste. We may well trust to her in the rest, which we do not yet detect. Faith in the Divine Mother. For the rest, it is impossible to ignore the drive of set purpose, the guidance of apparent blind tendency, the sure eventual or immediate coming to the target sought, which characterize the operations of world force in the animal, in the plant, in inanimate things. So long as matter was alpha and omega to the scientific mind, the reluctance to admit intelligence as the mother of intelligence was an honest scruple. But now it is no more than an outworn paradox to affirm the emergence of human consciousness, intelligence, and mastery out of an unintelligent, blindly driving unconsciousness in which no form or substance of them previously existed. And he comes to the point. Man's consciousness can be nothing else than a form of nature's consciousness. It is there in other involved forms below mind. It emerges in mind. It shall ascend into yet superior forms beyond mind. For the force that builds the worlds is a conscious force. The existence which manifests itself in them is conscious being, and a perfect emergence of its potentialities and form is the sole object which we can rationally conceive for its manifestation of this world of forms. Sat, Chit, and next, Anand. The next chapter, 11. The delight of existence, the problem. Followed by the 12th chapter, the delight of existence, the solution. So we will be immersed in delight for the next several weeks. If you have any questions about what we covered tonight.
I just had one question. Well, I have many questions, but one that thought came up top of my head, which is, I don't have any problem thinking about rock as a form having a consciousness, as he describes. But a book, for example, it's the ink that made the book has been processed and mixed through with so many things and finally merges, and the paper, the same thing, it emerges together and puts together, and then we have this object, this form.
Yes.
What is does it have, and it has to be a manifested form, I mean, it's,
Yes.
but what is the consciousness of that? Did we create it if we made all those chemicals? Can we make a plant? No.
You can say that the cosmos created it through your actions. Again, the big picture from the macro to the micro. Yes, and that form persists and has its integrity. And if you're, from your level, if you move back from your conscious mind, which will wonder about these things, into the depths and the splendor of your soul, then when you pick up that object, you can feel its delight in its own being. It is in a swoon. It is not absolutely unconscious, but it is in a deep submerged state of consciousness. But it can feel and respond in ways which are appropriate to materiality, what you project upon it. So all things feel the impact of how we live and behave. So that object, that book, that pen that you pick up, will come to feel itself loved by you or despised by you. It will want to stay with you. That pen, should you lose it, will find its way back to you. It will insist on being returned to its home. And that thing which is not cared for, which is irrelevant to it, it maintains in a stolid way the integrity of its form so long as it can, and then surrenders it. The cosmos claims it back, it goes back into materia, and is refashioned into something else. But so long as something exists, it is a test of our awareness as to how we esteem it, how we regard it, what we do with it, because we imprint it with our consciousness. So the things which are held by Sri Ramana Maharshi, or Sri Aurobindo, or the Mother, they have imparted their consciousness to those physical objects. And if you're sensitive, you can feel that vibration, and you can benefit from it. You can grow from having it near you. In fact, it can be a partner in awakening your consciousness. We think of what we can bestow upon it. It has its own gifts to present to us. The perfectly shaped object, when we look at it, compels us to perfectly harmonize our own being. Why should we not be like that? Why should we not be intact? Why should we not be shining? How can we go about with low thoughts without great motivation in our life? Why should we be depressed? Look at that thing, bravely standing as a stability in the midst of all of this movement. Why cannot I be that? So even material objects teach us how to stand, how to behave. Tree pose, mountain pose. Yes.
I remember poorly the story of Mother going somewhere once, and the people she was visiting hastily took some tools and put them in a shed. And,
Shed.
yes. And she veered off the
It's
path to
very
the shed.
comfortable.
And they were like, Mother, no, come this way. And she opened the shed and all the tools were like, look how they have treated me.
That's right. That's a great anecdote. Good memory. That's it. You remembered it well. Yeah. Madhav recorded it, I think, in Sidelights on the
Yes.
Mother.
Yeah.
MP Pundit. Somebody later asked her, "Why did you go to that shed? Why did you go to that go down?" She said, "They were calling to me." Look how they have kept us. Look how they have kept us. Yes. Makes me ashamed of myself when I think of it. So, prepare yourself for delight. Next time, swim in that ocean of Ananda. So we'll go for our meditation. And I'll have calendars to distribute to you if you like when you come out. Once again, bonne année. If you have not seen or heard the message for the new year, give me just a moment. Let me read it to you. I think you'll find it appropriate. In the world of forms, a violation of beauty is as great a fault as a violation of truth in the world of ideas. For beauty is the worship nature offers to the Supreme Master of the universe. Beauty is the divine language in forms. I think it means to say beauty is the divine language in forms. And a consciousness of the divine which is not translated externally by an understanding and expression of beauty would be an incomplete consciousness, the mother. And you can see symbol of the lotus, a perfect form. So we'll go for our meditation, and when we come out, distribute these things if you'd like to have them. Namaste, Jai Ma. I salute the divine in you. And you, my friends on Zoom.